The storm didn't care about Mike Hargrove's loan balance. It didn't care about the $487,000 combine sitting in a service bay 60 miles away. It didn't care about the 31 years he'd spent learning this land, reading the sky, building something on this ground that was worth building. It was coming regardless. It had been coming since Wyoming. And on the morning of September 9th, 2023, Mike stood at the edge of his field and watched the northwest horizon go the color of a bruise. He had 620 acres of corn still standing, at $6.40 a bushel, 185 bushels per acre. Do the math. $735,000 in a field, exposed, waiting, and he had no way to move it. Let me tell you about Mike Hargrove, because you need to understand him before you can understand what he did next. 54 years old, he built like a man who never stopped working and never wanted to. His hands were the color of old saddle leather, permanently creased at the knuckles, with a thumbnail on his right hand that had been black for so long he'd forgotten what it looked like any other way. He wore the same Carhartt cap his father had given him in 1991. The embroidery was gone. The brim held the shape of 32 years of the same unconscious push before stepping outside. He believed one thing above everything else. The machine that works is worth 10 that don't. His father had said it. His grandfather had lived it. And for 31 years, Mike had run his operation on that principle, maintained his equipment, kept his spares, never trusted a warranty over a wrench. But 13 days ago, his John Deere S780 had beaten him, a $487,000 combine, a 2021 model, and the most technologically advanced harvesting machine Mike had ever owned. It had thrown a fault code on the hydrostatic drive, refused to reset, flagged a secondary error in the electrical bus that even the machine couldn't locate. And now it was sitting at the Platte Valley Equipment dealership in Columbus, Nebraska, plugged into a diagnostic computer, waiting on a part. 2 weeks, the service advisor had said. His name was Todd, 32 years old, polo shirt. He'd said it looking at a screen, not at Mike. Probably 2 weeks, Mr. Hargrove. Could be a little less. We'll call you. Mike had looked at him for a long moment. He'd said, and quietly, I need to be harvesting in 2 weeks. Todd had nodded. He had absolutely no idea what that meant, and that wasn't even the real problem yet. Mike found the real problem on his phone when he walked back to his truck. The extended forecast, updated that morning. The system pushing in from Wyoming wasn't a 2-day rain event anymore. 5 days. Hail probability, 40% by day 3. He sat in that truck for 6 minutes, not moving, just watching the radar loop rotate, slow and deliberate, like it had nowhere else to be. That green mass over Wyoming, tracking east, tracking towards 620 acres of corn that hadn't been touched. Then he started the engine, drove home, and started making calls. But that wasn't the end of the bad news, not even close. Every custom harvester in 200 miles was committed. It was September. And every machine that ran was already working someone else's problem. He found one operation out of Grand Island, a 2019 Case White H available. But the operator wanted $28 per acre, plus fuel, plus $3,400 mobilization, for 620 acres, $20,740. And the earliest he could get there was September 13th, 5 days away. The radar wasn't giving him 5 days. He called the insurance company. Pleasant, thorough, useless. Prevented loss wasn't actual loss. Document everything. Call back after the event. He called his neighbor, Dale Frick. 2 combines running. Crew sleeping 4 hours a night. Nothing to spare. Mike hung up and stood in his kitchen. Sandra sat at the table, coffee in both hands, not saying anything. 28 years of marriage. She knew when silence was the right answer. Outside, the northwest sky had gone pewter. He felt it then, that specific kind of dread that comes not from one problem, but from the collapse of every solution at once. The combine gone, the custom operators gone, the neighbor gone, the insurance irrelevant, the forecast moving faster than anyone had predicted. He was out of moves, or he thought he was. August 14th, 2:17 p.m. Mike walked to the back of the machine shed. He'd been avoiding it, not consciously, but the way you avoid a door you're not sure you want to open. He grabbed the canvas tarp with both hands and pulled. The John Deere 4430 came out of the shadow like something that had been waiting. 125 horsepower, two-wheel drive, a 16-speed power shift transmission, and a cast-iron block that weighed more than some pickup trucks. Mike's father had bought it new in April of that year for $24,000, borrowed against the farm to put something in the field that would last. It had lasted through 1988's drought, through 1993's flood, through every consolidation that swallowed the neighbors on either side. It had last run regularly in 2012. Since then, the tarp, the diesel, the oil, and 11 years of silence. Mike stood in front of it. This machine had no GPS, no telematics, no electrical bus to throw codes, no software to update, no satellite to wait for. It ran on direct injection diesel that a competent mechanic could fix with hand tools and a printed manual. It was, in the most fundamental sense, a machine that worked, but it couldn't harvest corn alone. And that's where most men would have stopped thinking. Mike didn't stop. He made one call. Gerald Ott. He's 71 years old, 12 miles south on a gravel road. In a steel building behind his house, a 1978 John Deere 6600 combine, 8-row cornhead, retired from active use in 2009 when Gerald's son Kevin took over and bought newer iron. Gerald answered on the second ring. "Does the 6600 run?" Mike asked. A pause. "I run it every fall." "Why?" Mike told him. Quiet. Then, "That machine hasn't made serious harvest miles in 14 years, Mike." "I know, and I don't have a crew." "I know that too." The pause that followed was the kind where a man isn't hesitating. He's deciding. What's the weather looking like? 48 hours, maybe less. Gerald said, "Give me an hour." Gerald arrived at 4:30 with Kevin and the 6600 on a lowboy. They unloaded it, bolted the cornhead on, greased every fitting, checked the gathering chains. He pulled the inspection covers. Kevin found a cracked belt on the feeder house. Not broken. Almost. He had a spare in the truck. Gerald had raised him to carry spares, and they changed it in 20 minutes. Mike watched without saying a word. Then Gerald climbed into the cab, idled for 5 minutes, and said, "You want to see if she'll make rows?" The 6600 drifted at the headlands. The gathering chains chattered. The elevator made a sound. Gerald filed away for later. But the corn came off the stalks. The grain went into the tank. It worked, not perfectly, but perfect wasn't available tonight. Here's what they were running. A 1974 tractor pulling a grain cart, feeding a 1978 combine, unloading into a semi driven by Sandra's brother-in-law, trucking to an elevator 12 miles east. A system that had been standard practice in this county in 1985. By 2023, most operations had replaced every part of it with GPS-guided machines uploading yield data to the cloud. 4 $500,000 computers were waiting for satellites tonight. 2 old machines were already in the field. But here's what nobody tells you about hope. It's the most dangerous thing you can feel in the middle of a crisis. By 8 p.m., they'd harvested 80 acres. The math was improving. The rain was still holding off. Gerald was finding his rhythm with the 6,600. The grain was moving clean. Mike let himself think, just for a moment, that they might actually do this. That was the moment the right rear tire went. Not a slow leak. A blowout. The sidewall had been sitting compressed in the same position for 11 years, and the field approach, softened by evening dew, gave the final push. And the cart tipped 4 degrees before Mike felt it through the wheel and stopped. 4 degrees. He climbed down in the dark with a flashlight. The tire was destroyed, not repairable, not patchable. Gone. He stood there and did the calculation nobody wanted to do. The nearest farm tire service that came out at 10 p.m. was 45 minutes away. If they answered. They were on hold for 6 minutes before someone picked up. 2 hours minimum. The tech was on another call. 2 hours. Mike looked at the northwest sky. He looked at his watch. The math was brutal and simple. They were done. Except they weren't. He called Ryan, his son, 26 years old, already driving grain to the elevator for the 3rd time that night. 3 words back. Dale's got one. Dale Fricka, 2 miles east. I used 18.438 in his tire pile. Came off a tractor he'd sold 3 years ago. Not the exact size. The 4430 ran 18.434, but close enough to seat the bead, hold pressure, carry the load if they didn't push it. Ryan drove to Dale's in 11 minutes, back in 22. They changed the tire by flashlight. Mike and Ryan with a floor jack and a breaker bar on soft ground, the 4430 listing to one side, grain cart still attached, still loaded, still sitting at that 4-degree tilt that made both of them work faster without saying so. At 11:31 p.m., the cart was moving again. Nobody said anything. There wasn't time. And then, before they could even catch their breath, it got worse. 1:14 a.m. The 6600's elevator chain started skipping. Quiet at first, just a tick. The kind of sound that only experienced ears catch before instruments do. Our Gerald caught it immediately. Shut down. Climbed out with a flashlight. A stretched link jumping the sprocket. Not broken. Becoming broken. He had chain. Of course he did, but the repair took 47 minutes. In the dark, with a wind from the northwest that carried the first cold edge of what was coming. Mike stood beside the combine during those 47 minutes and looked at the sky. Stars to the south. Nothing to the northwest. The kind of nothing that means everything. He did the math again. They had 260 acres left. At their pace, when they were running, 18 acres per hour. 14 more hours of field time needed. They had maybe 4 before the rain made it impossible. He didn't say any of this out loud. Kevin finished the chain at 2:01 a.m. They started again. Faster. September 10th. 3:44 a.m. The first drops hit the cab roof of the 4430. Not many, just the scouts. The advanced drops a storm sends ahead. Mike felt them through the open window and looked at Gerald's silhouette through the combine cab glass, 60 yards ahead, still moving. We're not getting all of it. Then the second thought, the one that mattered, how much can we take? He keyed the Motorola, 16 channels, bought at a farm auction in 2004. Gerald, rain starting, steady voice back. I know. How much you want to push? The storm core was still 90 minutes out. The leading rain was light. If they kept moving, if the rows stayed clear, if the 6600 held. Push, Mike said. One word. They pushed. What followed doesn't photograph well. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't loud. It was just 2 old machines and 3 people moving through standing corn in the dark and the rain. The kind of ordinary stubbornness that happens 1,000 times a season across the Midwest and gets noticed by nobody except the people doing it and the families depending on them. The 4430 ran without complaint. Rain on the hood, mud building under the tires, exhaust rising into the cold air, visible in the combine's work lights, the engine pulling at steady load. No hesitation, no codes, no computer deciding the conditions exceeded operational parameters. It just ran. That's all it did. But that was everything. The 6600 matched it. Gerald was pushing harder than was wise for a machine its age. He knew it. He kept pushing. The chain held. The gathering chains threw mud and kept feeding. The tank filled every 35 minutes. At 4:52 a.m., the main rain arrived. Hard, straight, reducing visibility to 40 yards. The grain cart approach became a matter of feel and memory. Mike made it by feel and memory. Sandra at the auger wagon kept going. Kevin in the semi kept going. And then came the moment. 6:18 a.m., the last row. Gerald ran the 6600 down the final pass of the north field, the corn head chewing through the last of 617 acres, rain on the cab roof, mud on every surface, the elevator making that sound it had been making since 1:14 in the morning that Gerald had been nursing and monitoring and willing to hold together for just a few more minutes. The auger swung out, 800 bushels into the grain cart, the combine tank empty. Gerald's voice came over the Motorola. One word. Done. Mike sat in the cab of the 4430. Rain on the roof. Wipers on. Engine idling at 1,000 revolutions per minute. That sound, that particular diesel idle that his father had stood next to in 1974 and that he had grown up hearing and that had been silent for 11 years and was now here, running in the rain, at 6:18 in the morning. He reached down and turned the key off. The engine ran 4 more seconds. Diesel burning what remained. Then silence. Just the rain. He sat there and didn't move. Outside the window, brown field, gray sky, empty rows. 617 acres harvested. 3 lost to mud in the northwest corner that were never worth fighting for anyway. Done. The hail came 6 hours later. It tracked the county line 3 miles north. Mike's fields were south of the line. The corn, now grain, now in the elevator, now safe, took none of it. Ron Larson, 2 miles north, lost 380 acres of standing corn. Ron had been waiting on a parts delivery too. The final numbers: 617 acres, 188 bushels per acre. Corn at $6.35, $735,000 gross, minus $18,000 in drying costs for the wet north field, minus a mismatched tire and 2 midnight service calls and a chain link that cost 47 minutes and a decade's worth of aging off Gerald Ott's nerves. Net result: a year that should have been destroyed wasn't. The S780 came back September 19th. Todd called. Part arrived faster than expected. Mike asked one question. What was the part? An electrical control module, hydrostatic drive, size of a hardcover book, made in Germany, $4,200. Unavailable in the United States for 11 days because of a freight delay out of Frankfurt. 11 days? A freight delay? $487,000 machine, part the size of a book. A freight delay from Frankfurt. Mike thanked him and hung up. Gerald took the 6600 home. Had the chain replaced properly. New tarp. The old one had worn through at the corners. Kevin asked him a few weeks later if he'd sell the machine now. Gerald thought about it. No, he didn't explain. Kevin didn't ask. That winter, Mike had the 4430 serviced for the first time in 11 years. New filters, new tires. Injection pump rebuilt by one of maybe 40 men in the country who still knew how. Total cost, $3,100. He didn't put it back under the tarp. He parked it in the front bay of the machine shed, visible from the kitchen window. Ryan asked about it one morning over coffee. Why's the 4430 up front? Mike thought about Todd, about Gerald on his knees at 1:14 in the morning, about a mismatched tire changed by flashlight, about Sandra in the rain, and never once suggesting they stop, about $735,000 and a sky that owed nobody anything. Because I want to remember what it sounds like, he said. Ryan nodded. He was 26. Sometimes that's old enough. September 2024. The S780 threw a code again. Same system, different number. The dealer said a week, maybe 10 days. Mike called Gerald. Second ring. How's the 6600? Greased and ready. That pause again. The comfortable kind. Between two men who have stood in a field in the rain at 3 a.m. and kept moving anyway. I'll be there in an hour, Mike said. The John Deere 443. Oh, that sat under a tarp for 11 years, is still running in Platte County, Nebraska. It has no GPS, no auto steer, no connection to anything except the ground it moves across and the man in its cab. It doesn't need a satellite to find the row. It never did. And 12 miles south, are in a steel building on a gravel road, a 1978 combine sits in the dark. Greased. Ready. Some machines aren't retired. They're waiting. Under this video, you'll see a subscribe button, a small action with a big meaning. By pressing it, you're not only supporting the creation of more content like this, but you're also becoming part of the very exchange we've been talking about, giving and receiving in harmony. It's not about the size of the action, it's about the meaning. A simple subscription tells me these words reached you. It tells me that the effort, the late nights, and the discipline to bring this message forward mattered to someone on the other side of the screen.